Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. Mishnah Yomi continues for Shabbat B'Sholach. We are in the third parak of Eiruvin at the third Mishnah. And our topic right now is Eruv techumin, the kind of Eruv used to extend the distance in one direction that you can walk on Shabbat. We recall from Masechet Shabbat that there is a techum, a 2,000 amma distance outside of the city that one can travel. What if there's a Mishnah Yomi convention, a Daf Yomi convention? It's a little farther out, so a person could place food farther out to allow him to travel another 2,000 amma past that food to get to the convention on Shabbat. Now, Mishnah Gimel gives some details about what if he puts his Eruv in one kind of reshut. We call in Shabbat there's reshut Rabim, reshut Yachid, individual, private domains, public domains, Carmelit, which is sort of a neutral parv area. So Mishnah Gimel reads Netano be'ilan. What if he puts it up a tree? So lamalam asri mesara tefachim. If it's higher than 10 tefachim up into the tree, ein eruvo eruv. It is not a valid eruv. Why? Because he cannot go up and bring it down. He cannot reach up there and bring it down because that would be already a private domain, a reshut yachid, and he wouldn't be able to bring the food down from there to the base of the tree in the reshut harabim. Lamata me'asar tefachim eruvo eruv. If it's on the tree, on a branch, or in the trunk of the tree or something below 10 tefachim, it is a valid eruv because that's part of reshut harabim. He could just technically sit there at the base of the tree and pull out the food and go ahead and eat. So he can't climb the tree on Shabbat. It's an isur d'Rabbanan. You might break off a branch. You can't use trees at all on Shabbat, so do not hang your coat or your hat on a tree on Shabbat, because then you can't take it off anymore. Now the Mishnah continues with a similar case. Natana babori, put it into a pit, into the ground, underground, afilu amak me'ama. Even if he was in Minecraft mode and he dug down 100 amma down below the surface, eruvo eruv. It's still a valid eruv. Now in the second case, the Gemara explains that he wants to have shvita. He wants his place, where his residence, where he could eat his eruv if he wanted to, in a Carmelit. And a Carmelit is not a reshut yachid, not an individual private domain, and not reshut rabim, not a public domain. It's parv, it's neutral. So he could take on a biblical level, he'd be allowed. There's a rabbinic restriction, but on a biblical level, he's allowed to take from a reshut yachid this pit, this bore that he's dug or exists into the Carmelite. So it is a valid Eruv. The Mishnah brings another case, Netano Barosh HaKona. He puts it on top of a reed, like a bamboo, O Barosh HaKundas, or on top of a pole, like a telephone pole or something. Bizman Shehu Tolush Venot. As long as this reed or bamboo or something, it's not growing out of the ground, it's been disconnected from the ground already and then stuck into the ground. Even if it's 100 amot tall, hare ze eruv. It is an eruv. This pole, this on top of the pole, is not big enough to be a reshut yachid or a reshut rabim or a carmelit. It is a makom patur. It is an exempt area with regards to transferring on Shabbat. So he could technically put his eruv up there because technically he's able to get it down either into the carmelit or whatever reshut he's into. Now, it does have to be not growing out of the ground, because then there's a concern of tolush, that he would be come to pull something off of this if it's growth, this tree or pole or bamboo is actually growing. So that has to be something that's no longer growing. Now, the Mishnah continues, Netano b'migdal v'avada mafteach. He put it into a locking cabinet or chest, and then they lost the key. Harei ze eruv. It is still a valid eruv, even though lemaisa he can't get in there and eat his food. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer is a chiluk. Im eino yodea shemafteach b'mkomo. If he doesn't know that the key is in its place, eino eruv. It's not a good eruv. Now, in the first case here, they originally had the key because he needed it to put the food in there. So at the critical time when the sun sets on Friday evening, it was available. They had the key, and then later on it's lost. So since Friday at sundown, it was a valid Eruv when Shabbos began. So it's still a valid Eruv, even though they lost the key. The Gemara explains Rabbi Eliezer is dealing with a muksa issue. Also, see the Gemara there for details. On to Mishnah Dolid. Nitgalgil chutz l'tchum. He had his Eruv, maybe he had a barrel of wine or something, and it was on a hill. And then it rolled out of his tchum, past the 2,000 amma limit, where by default he could walk on Shabbat. So now Lamaisi has a problem. He can't get to where the food is, even though the food was in the right place when Shabbat began. or nafal alav gol, or a pile of rubble, or either some sort of earthquake or collapse of a building fell on it and buried it. O nisraf, or it got burnt up. O truma v'nidmet, or it was truma and the sheretz came along and died on it, and it became truma tmeya, and even the Kohen cannot eat truma tmeya, can only burn it. So the Mishnah explains, mi ba'od yom, if this happened when it's still daytime, like Friday late afternoon, like he put his food out there to make his erev techum, Friday at 2 p.m. and then Friday at 4 p.m. before Shabbos starts, something went wrong. So that's eino erev, because at the critical moment of Shkia on Friday afternoon, it was not in existence. It wasn't available. Misha Hashecha, if it got messed up after Shkia, after Shabbos began, Hare Ze Eruv, because at the critical moment, it was a valid Eruv. Now, im safek, what about a case of doubt? We're really not sure when the fire broke out or when they got tame. We don't know exactly when that happened. We weren't there, but, we figure out, we don't know. So Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Omrim, they say, Hare Ze Chamer Gumel. It's a donkey camel. Now, this is an expression. It means if you're leading a donkey, you're driving a donkey, you have to stand behind the donkey. And if it's a gummel, a camel, you have to stand in front of the camel. You don't want to go behind a camel. They kick. This is what I heard. I don't know firsthand. So you have a limitation. You're stuck behind the donkey and in front of the camel. So what this means regarding his Tehum Shabbos is he has to stay in between his house and the place of the safek Eruv, where he wanted to put the Eruv and something went wrong. Because halachically speaking here is if the Eruv was not valid, then he can go from his house 2,000 amot in any direction. And if the Eruv was valid and it did work, then he can go from that Eruv, from that makom shvita, his new dwelling place established by the food, 2,000 amot in any direction. But now, since we don't know, he's stuck in the 2,000 amot between the house and the safek Eruv. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, but they say safek Eruv kosher. A doubt about an Eruv is kosher. Again, the logic here is an Eruv is a din dirabanan. I'm actually misspeaking here. I'm correcting myself. Eruv techum is based on a deraisa. It's a pasuk about not going beyond your makom on Shabbat, but there's a chazaka here. So the chazaka is we put the Eruv intact and tahor and not burned up and not buried. We put it there. So if a chazaka, it was still like that until we know otherwise. So they rely on this to establish that an Eruv where there's a doubt when it got messed up and unavailable to be an Eruv is kosher or not. They say it's kosher. Rabbi Yossi of Tulmus Haid, he says a sage called of Tulmus testified, Mishum Chamisha Zakenim, from 5 sages, al safek Eruv shekosher. He said also that we can rely on chazaka lemaisa, and the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, who's quoting Avtulmus, who's quoting 5 different sages. So that's pretty strong heter. Shabbat shalom, Rabbatai, sei gesund.